Okay, guys, not gonna lie, I've been praying and seeking God on whether or not I was even gonna do this video. And the reason why I'm doing it is because I do feel that it is necessary. So before we get started, don't take this as a Jason came on here and said, "Thus saith the Lord," because that's not what this is. This is me looking at the current situation, doing the math, breaking down everything over the last 3 years, and basically wargaming out a scenario. Uh, we all know that I have received several dreams and visions over the years of what was going to happen to America and its destruction and civil conflict and everything else. However, as anyone who's ever received a vision or a prophecy from God, you know that He gives you what is necessary, but the rest is kind of a fill in the blank. No specific times or dates are very rarely, if ever, given by the Lord. So, with everything that's going on, I felt it best that we look at this from a strategic point of view, from a military type mindset. And part of it is playing the devil's advocate, part of it is reading the room and everything that has led up to this point and using it in that plus history as a marker, if you will, in order to predict future possibilities and things that could very well happen. So I hope you'll join me in this, and we are going to wargame out this scenario and take a close look because I really want everybody to be prepared. Alright, so let's get started, shall we? Okay, so we're all familiar with what's happened in the last 72 hours or so with Hamas attacking Israel. Now, there's several things that have taken place and that are still taking place that could potentially be a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. The real question isn't necessarily what's stated in biblical prophecy, but for us here in America, it's how do we fall into the picture? What happens here? Well, you've been with me long enough. You've heard the dreams and visions that God has given me. But we have to have a backstory. Main reason is because this is deliberate. This is all by design. I mean, you will never convince me that someone like Biden gets in office and is the dumbest person on the planet that unintentionally destroys America to the level that he has. No, this is intentional. And it may not be Biden actually doing it because he's too far gone and too stupid to actually understand what he's doing, but whoever's pulling his strings knows exactly what they're doing, and hopefully we can show some of this and bring some relevance to it. Now, you guys know that I am not a fan of any sort of left-wing media, especially the New York Post, Washington Times, things like that nature, but I will give them credit on this one as far as breakdown goes because it's not terrible. It's not exactly the way I go about it, but it's not exactly terrible either. I mean, as we all know, it's all right here. Biden released an additional $6 billion to Iran, have eased off on sanctions enforcement, pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into Gaza, and betrayed Iranian dissidents, all to curry favor with Tehran. I mean, that's accurate. You can't really deny that, right? Not to mention the debacle in Afghanistan. He left, what, $80 billion worth of military equipment. I'm talking helicopters, jets, MRAPs, machine guns, artillery, night vision. I mean, he basically elevated those guys up to almost a modern world-class military as far as equipment goes. You can't tell me that that wasn't deliberate. I mean, you couldn't see the handwriting on the wall. You know what I mean? mean, and that's just part of it. What a lot of people don't know, that haven't really read into the situation, is there was also a spy ring within the Biden administration that was anti-Israel, all done by an Iranian envoy, Robert Malley, who was quietly removed last June. Now, they've gone on claiming that there was no Iranian spy network within his administration and everything, but, I mean, the proof's there. I mean, come on. So, the question remains, how much of this was deliberate? Well, if we actually look at Albert Pike's letter to Monsini, which I'm not going to pull it up right now, you guys can in your own free time, but he actually outlined in this letter to Monsini the need for 3 world wars. And in the third one, it talked about pitting the Christians against the Muslims and the Jews and making it so destructive and so financially outrageous that it would collapse the international banking system in order to give them room and chaos for, Antichrist, so to speak, to rise to power. So that's just part of it, though. And that really just deals with what we see going on overseas right now, because we've got Ukraine, Russia, China, Thailand, and now we have Israel versus Hamas. However, the real clincher is the reports that Russia's cyber division of the military has even attacked Israel, including blanking out the northern part of Israel's radar system, which has led for some of these, furtherance of attacks. And, Russia's basically put Israel on notice because they're backing Iran. They're not going to stand in Israel's corner. And we're watching, it's almost like watching World War II happen all over again, right? Basically what we're seeing is alliances being made, almost similar to the Allied versus the Axis powers, but it's a new flavor, a new mixture, okay? Now, what happened in Israel can very easily happen here. The question is, why do I say that? Well, look at how many terrorists they've supposedly caught and how many they have not caught just on our southern border alone within the last year. I want to say the number is around 160 that was actually caught, if I remember correctly. Let me check. Nope, wrong one. Aha! Here we go. That's the one I'm looking for, right there. Okay. Now, and this is New York Post again. Of course, they lie. I mean, the numbers are probably skewed, but feds prevented over 160 people on terror watch lists from crossing U.S. border illegally, highest total ever recorded, and that was in 2023. That's just been this past year. But what about the ones they didn't catch? Not to mention how many cartel members are coming over here. Chinese are coming over here, and I'm talking. These are all military-age fighting males. All right, we have been infiltrated, and it has been allowed to be infiltrated, and we're going to get to the real ins and outs of this here in a minute. So just hang with me. All right. I want to bring up one more thing, just in case you guys don't know yet. All right, and that's this. Okay, what is a war game? War game is a simulated battle or campaign to test military concepts and usually conducted in conferences by officers acting as the opposing staffs. All right, so basically what that means is you sit down, tell you what, easiest way for me to do this. If you guys will remember, I did a video some years ago on Operation Dark Winter. Operation Dark Winter was itself a military strategy war game done by a think tank here in the U.S. that involves some politicians and military personnel. And basically the war game that they brought into play was what would happen if a decently mass casualty biological agent was released on the American public. Well, it showed exactly what would happen and the destruction of America that would follow, how quickly everything would break down, the social systems and everything else. So what did they do? They took that information and they learned how to flip it to their advantage so they could gain more power, more authority, more control, and be more tyrannical. So that's what we're looking at now. So we're going to play out this very similar type scenario because we're going to play devil's advocate. If I was the one in power and I wanted this control, how would I go about doing it, right? Okay, so let's break this down real quick, and I'll see if I can walk you through where my mind's at and hopefully get some people prepared for what could potentially be on the horizon. Okay, so you're kind of going to have to bear with me because my mind is in a million different places right now. So I'm going to try and lay out the scenario the best I can. All right? Over the last few years, we've seen the weaponization of the federal government against the American people. Anyone that supports liberty, the Constitution, gun rights, Christianity, stuff like that has been heavily demonized, and the DOJ and the FBI and the ATF, as well as the CIA, plus the DHS, plus a number of other federal agencies have been weaponized against the American public. Why? Well, because you're watching the rise of a communist regime. That's really the best way I can put it. Never mind geopolitics and everything going into labeling something communist and all that stuff. Okay. All right. Just like in the last video I did, I talked about how we are being watched by the FBI and labeled as potential domestic terrorists. Right? Okay. Never mind all the reports I have of the FBI kicking in doors, raiding people that did peaceful protests outside abortion clinics, or the ATF going after owners of certain types of firearms, or firearm parts like bump stocks or force reset triggers, pistol braces, things of that nature. Okay, and the most recent one was they forbid a company from selling Simunition. You know, these Simunition rounds, they're meant for training, right? It's kind of like a bullet that has a paint cap in it, okay? And these are meant for force-on-force training, you know, so people are acclimated to what to expect when they're on a confrontation, a physical face-to-face, right? Why are they trying to prevent people from being able to train? I mean, a good owner is a responsible gun owner, is someone who takes gun ownership seriously, who actually trains with their weapons, understands what their purposes are, what their limitations are, what they're used for, the best scenarios, how to protect the innocent, that kind of thing. So why would a federal agency want to prevent the populace from being able to do that? Because the ATF has come out and said, you can't sell these to the public anymore. The only people that can have them are law enforcement and military. Why? Why is that? Well, not to sugarcoat it, not to put it lightly, it's because they don't want us little pissant civilians being able to defend ourselves against their tyrannical regime. Never mind the tyrannical regime. Let's say they go ahead and go with their plans, destroy America to the point that Russia, China, North Korea, Hamas, Iran, the Muslims, actually go on a full-on invasion here. While everybody's busy fighting each other, how are they going to defend the other people? And if they're not trained to defend against the other people, what are their chances of survival? Very slim. Very slim. So that's why we're taking this very seriously right now. Because just as I pointed out to you earlier, our southern border is wide open. Hundreds of thousands, millions have been pouring into the U.S. No checks, no verifications, no IDs ran, no medicals done. So we're seeing a rise in like tuberculosis cases. We're seeing a rise in violent crimes committed by these foreigners and everything else. But we're also seeing a network and infrastructure being set up inside of America that is backed by the cartels, which are supplied and armed and trained by China. Islamic terrorists, which, if you'll remember, not that long ago, just a few years ago, we actually had reports of these terrorist camps that were being set up, like these little small communities that were forbidden from outsiders. You know, if you weren't Muslim, if you weren't part of the group, you weren't getting in. And if you did try to get in, you'd be met with a threat of violence. Okay, so what are they hiding? What are they doing? Well, you're watching the systematic infrastructure being placed in America to bring about its destruction. All right? Don't make the mistake of thinking that what happened in Israel can't happen here, because it very well can, and it most likely will. The question is the timing. I firmly believe, after the dreams and visions I've received and reading other dreams and visions from people like Henry Groover, Dimitri Duduman, people of that nature, that showed the destruction of America. And it's going to coincide. Civil War and World War III are going to happen almost simultaneously. But how's that going to come down? Well, what I believe we're going to see is, I believe we're going to see attacks done by terrorists, mass shootings, people being hit, hit and runs, kind of like that bus attack that happened, I want to say it was in France a number of years ago, by that Islamic extremist, took the bus and just started plowing through people and stuff like that. And you're going to see these things start to take place, all right? That means you got to have your head on a swivel. But, and here's the clincher, that's not the only thing that's going to take place. As you see some of these events taking place, the mass shootings, the terroristic type attacks and everything, you're going to see a complete about-face and the targeting of conservatives, the targeting of Christians by our own government, because they're not going to pass up this opportunity to squash anyone that could depose them or remove them from power. They're not going to do it. So you're going to start seeing, kind of like you've seen for the last couple of years, these mass shootings or these car strikes or whatever take place, and then all of a sudden, even though the dude on the screen is clearly Mexican, he's Latino, right? But the media is claiming that he's a far-right extremist. Really? You're telling me that dude's a Nazi? You're telling me that dude's super far-right and is not... Huh? You see what I'm getting at? Okay, so as these events take place and start to increase in number, you're going to start seeing the federal government, you're going to start seeing people at the FBI, the DOJ, the ATF, DHS, the mainstream media, are going to use these events to further demonize gun owners, Christians, conservatives. Because they've already shown us that, in their eyes, we are the enemy. Why? Because we love our freedom. We love our rights that God gave to us. And they want to take those rights away. The only way they can do that is to squash any intent of rebellion that might exist. Identify, vilify, nullify, destroy. Identify your target. Vilify them in full view of the public. Nullify them to the extent that their voice doesn't matter to anybody else. And then you destroy them. So, once this takes place, and once the media is 100% in their corner, and the government is starting to label us en masse as extremists or agitators or people that, what's their favorite quote here recently? Oppose democracy. Well, first off, America is not a democracy, it's a democratic republic. So, get your facts straight. Second is, I will fight and die for the rights and freedoms that God gave me. I know where my line is in the sand. I hope you do as well. So, this is what we're going to start to see. I can't say the when for sure. However, all the pieces of the puzzle are in place. And I believe as World War III progresses and becomes more intensified over there, we're going to see the same thing happen here. And it's going to get to the point where each one of us is going to have to make a decision. You get that knock on your door at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or someone trying to break into your house. How are you going to respond? These are decisions that you have to make, things that you have to prepare for. Do you have a way out? Do you have an emergency plan in place? Do you know how to exit? And I mean exit fast. Do you know how to do a quick exit? Do you have the infrastructure and the security protocols set up around your house that you will be flagged the moment someone even comes close to your property? And this can be done by motion sensors, camera systems. There's a number of things you can do to shelter and shield yourself and your family so that you have an early warning system in place? These are things that you have to consider. Do you have weapon caches, food caches, stored and buried at other locations? That way, if you have to cut out quick, you can restock and resupply somewhere else. This is stuff that you have to have in mind, things that you have to prepare for. Because as we saw in Israel, when they were attacked and these terrorists were going door to door, beating, killing, raping, and kidnapping, you will see the same thing happen here. It could be at the hands of terrorists and extremists, or it could be at the hands of the federal government. So the question remains, what are you willing to do? What does the safety and security of your family mean to you? What are you willing to sacrifice to protect your family, yourself, and those around you? These are all very serious questions we have to bring about and have. Now, I can't take every single account into, every possibility into this equation, because there's so many different variables that it's hard to get a 100% clear and concise picture. So I'm trying to share with you, to the best of my ability, what I see in the patterns based on history of other countries that have been taken over by terroristic, tyrannical regimes throughout history. They would go after the guns, they would divide the people, they would make neighbors snitch on other neighbors, you get the knock at the door, you're under arrest, do not let them disarm you. If the people in Israel had had guns, they would have had a fighting chance. But Israel was so draconian in their gun laws that your average citizen could not have one unless you were in military service. We see how that worked out there. We can't allow the same thing to happen here. Okay? And if you add in the economic and financial sector and the rising interest rates, the food cost, gasoline, and all that stuff on top of it, it creates a very, very bleak and abysmal picture for America. Okay? And like I said, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm not trying to freak you out. I'm just trying to wake you up and get you to the point where you're like, hey, I need to have some stuff planned out. That way I know when the shoe drops how we escape, how we get away, how we defend ourselves. Because there's sleeper cells all over the U.S. right now. And I mean everywhere. What is a sleeper cell? A sleeper cell is an entity that's put in another country by a foreign country, right? By an opposing enemy, where they will blend into society, they will have their own communes, their own houses, their own jobs, and everything else. But the moment they get the call from their superiors that activates them, they go and carry out whatever plans and instructions they've been given, whether that's taking down power plants, whether that's bringing destruction to the financial system, whether that's destroying gas stations, mass killings, whatever it may be. Just like in Russia, there's a term called gray terror, right? Gray terror is very simple. One sleeper agent that's activated, all he needs is a screwdriver or a hammer, and he can cause mass disruptions by simply going out and tinkering with the railway lines or a power station or a bridge or something along those lines. You know what I mean? Do not underestimate the power of one when their belief is that hardcore. Okay? So we have to take these things into effect. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because I actually honestly believe that we are entering into a very dark period of history as far as America is concerned. I believe that we are at the end of times world events. My timing could be off. I pray that it is. I pray that we have more time. I really do. However, reading the room, reading the current political structure, reading the geopolitics, and reading what's going on within our own nation, as I said, it's a very abysmal picture. So the best thing we can do is be ready. That means you should be carrying a gun. If you're in a constitutional carry state, more power to you, brother. Don't just carry, though. Train. Train like your life depends on it, because it may very well be the case, as well as the lives of others. Take your training very seriously. whenever you guys need groceries, do not send your wife to the grocery store alone. You go with her. You provide that protection. And if you can't, make sure she is trained and knows what to look for. That way if something pops off there, she has her wits about her and the training in place so she knows how to get out of the situation and get back home safely. This is very, very, very important. I can't stress how important this is. As a matter of fact, I will actually have some videos and some training stuff coming up very soon that are going to be on the website, on the subscriber side, and I will share what I can publicly, but YouTube really hates stuff like that, so you'll probably have to go to Rumble in order to see some of the snippets and some of the stuff that I can release publicly, but it is coming, because I want you to be trained, I want you to be ready, I want you to be prepared for whatever is going to take place next. Alright? So, just to recap real quick. What happened in Israel can happen here. The infrastructure for terrorist cells and sleeper cells is already in place. Our own government has weapons caches and ammunition already stored for them all throughout America. So this is deliberate. This is not accidental. Not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. The only way the Antichrist comes to power and that the world is unified under his global dominance and whatnot is through the destruction of America, because we are the last bastion of armed Christians and conservatives that can actually oppose and fight. The rest of the world doesn't have that. We do. We are the threat. Take those words very seriously. Pray about them. Seek the Lord about it. Ask Him what you need to be doing to prepare not only for yourself, but others that God might be leading to you. Okay? So, I know this is a bit of a scatterbrain video, but hopefully I've made my point concise and clear enough, and I will be working on doing a more strategic breakdown and analysis on everything that we see, because I really want you guys to have the proper edge that you need to make it through whatever is on the horizon. So stay tuned. I will be working on that. It might take me a few days. It might even take me a week or so, but I am going to do my best to bring it about. Alright guys, having said that, please take what I said seriously. Don't just take my word for it. Look up the articles yourself. Look into it yourself, because everything that I'm mentioning to you, you can find the news articles and the credentials and the proof for online easy. So do that. Do the research. See if you come to the same conclusion that I do. Seek the Lord in prayer about it. And take whatever instructions He gives you very seriously and be obedient to that. Alright guys, having said that, it's Archangel.